Hello, I'm Nathaniel Brandt. Thanks for joining us for this special presentation. Throughout our newscast tonight, we'll be learning about some special research that was conducted in Mr. Brandt's Shellsburg Elementary 5th grade classroom. Mr. Brandt stated that at the beginning of the year he noticed that some of his students struggled with fluency while they were reading. Due to the fact that fluency is such an important indicator of reading success, Mr. Brandt chose the topic of reading fluency as his research topic. The purpose of the study was to investigate how instruction in fluent reading affects reading performance. We are fortunate enough to have Mr. Brandt join us from his classroom, despite the fact school is out for the summer. Our listeners are quite interested in knowing about your research question and the sub-questions you wanted to answer when conducting your research, Mr. Brandt. What could you tell us about that? First of all, Nathaniel, thanks for taking an interest in my project. The research question I wanted to answer was, what are the effects of fluency instruction on the reading achievement of 5th graders? Then I had 6 sub-questions to answer. To what extent did fluency instruction affect reading rate? To what extent did fluency instruction affect comprehension? To what extent did fluency instruction affect prosody, the ability of readers to read a text with appropriate expression and phrasing to reflect meaning? To what extent did fluency instruction affect attitude towards reading? To what extent did fluency instruction affect motivation to read? And the last sub-question was, to what extent did fluency instruction affect students' confidence as readers? Thanks, Mr. Brandt. We'll see you again later on in the show. The next portion of our program, we're going to again be reporting from a remote location. This time the location will have a little bit more of a view as our Cedar Rapids correspondent, Nathaniel, details the literature Mr. Brandt reviewed to gain some background information about the topic he was going to research. Nathaniel, when you interviewed Mr. Brandt, what did you find out about the literature he reviewed? Well, Mr. Brandt broke his literature review down into 5 different topics: fluency, reading rate, prosody, comprehension, and repeated readings. The first section dealt with fluency. Fluency is a combination of accuracy, automaticity, and prosody. According to Young and Rosinski, students read accurately when they read words from the text with no mispronunciations. Automaticity is the ability of the reader to read words correctly using very little effort, so they are able to focus more of their attention on comprehending what they are reading. Students who read with prosody show the ability to read the text with appropriate expression and phrasing. Applegate, and Model state, research shows there is a strong correlation between reading fluency and overall reading achievement. When people read fluently, they are usually more successful as readers. The second section dealt with reading rate. Research shows reading rate can be an indicator of a reader's ability to comprehend what he or she reads. Markle and Dano found in order to become proficient with comprehension, an individual must reach a minimum of 90 words read per minute. If a person is able to reach this level, she will be able to answer most literal questions routinely. The third portion of the literature review detailed prosody. The results of a study conducted by Yildiz et al. Showed with an increase in prosody skills, the subject's words correct per minute also increased. The same authors suggest by spending more time teaching prosody, reading rate and comprehension will also improve. The section regarding comprehension showed how a number of different things affected comprehension. Hudson, Lane, and Pullen found if students are not able to read accurately, there is no understanding the author's intended meaning of the text, which can lead to misinterpretation of what has been written. Also, students that are not able to read with automaticity have their ability to make ongoing interpretation of the text. Rosinski et al. Suggests that improvements in fluency could account for significant and substantial gains in comprehension. The final section discussed repeated readings. Rosinski points out repeated reading has shown to increase fluency and comprehension, not only on the passage that has been read repeatedly, but also on passages that are fresh or new to the reader. Also, Rosinski, along with Young, showed how repeated readings were able to increase student prosodic reading as well as double their reading rate, which led to an improvement in comprehension as well. That's all for the literature review. Back to you in the studio, Nathaniel. Thanks for that report, Nathaniel. Moving on, the next portion of our program will introduce you to the research design of Mr. Brandt. For that, we're going back to correspondent Nathaniel Brandt in a new location, a building with a unique design, the Czech and Slovak Museum. Nathaniel, when you spoke with Mr. Brandt, what did you find out about his research design?
Well, Nathaniel, Mr. Brandt carried out his research with 12 of his 5th grade students, 4 girls and 8 boys. The materials he used included fluency passages from the website readingatoz.com. He also used comprehension passages and questions from easycbm.com. To determine a score for prosody, the multidimensional fluency scale was used. Instructional materials also came from the Reading A to Z website, as well as novels the class was reading. Finally, the researcher created a survey to assess attitude towards reading, motivation to read, and confidence as a reader.
How was the research carried out?
Before beginning fluency instruction, Mr. Brandt gave a baseline assessment to every subject in the test group. Each subject read a fluency passage from Reading A to Z. While the subject was reading, Mr. Brandt completed a running record. After the reading fluency passage was completed, he scored the subject's fluency based on the multidimensional fluency rubric. He also recorded the number of words correct read per minute. While the words correct per minute was recorded, it was not the primary focus of the fluency instruction. Each subject also read a reading passage and answered online comprehension questions from the EasyCBM website. In addition to the fluency passage and comprehension passage, each subject filled out a survey pertaining to their attitude toward reading, their motivation to read, and their confidence as readers. Fluency groups met between 15 to 20 minutes during each session. During the first 10 to 12 sessions, subjects focused on reading punctuation correctly. While doing repeated readings, subjects paused or stopped correctly depending on what the punctuation called for. During the next 10 to 12 sessions, subjects focused on phrasing. Subjects read reading passages and determined how to break down each sentence into different phrases. After determining how to phrase each sentence, the subjects did repeated readings and practiced reading the phrases correctly. For the final 10 to 12 sessions, subjects focused on reading with expression. Subjects learned how to identify what is happening in the story, determine how their voices should sound, and convey that meaning to the listener. The repeated readings were done in a variety of ways. The researcher often began each new passage by modeling fluent reading to the small group. The group then proceeded to do an echo read, a choral read, and then each individual subject did a certain number of repeated readings on their own. In addition to reading in groups, subjects also followed the same procedure on their own while listening to and following along with Mr. Brandt on an iPod Touch. Subjects also used iPods to listen to and assess their fluency on reading passages. Mr. Brandt monitored fluency every 6 days of instruction. He collected comprehension data at the halfway mark and again at the end. The comprehension passages came from the easycbm.com website. After concluding the research period, Mr. Brandt administered the attitudinal, motivational, and confidence surveys a second time.
Now that you have heard how the research was conducted, let's find out whether or not the fluency instruction actually worked. As we're going to be sharing data with you, we thought what better place to share this with than at a place where data and statistics are everywhere. We're again going to send it out to Nathaniel, who's joining us from the Colonel's Ballpark in Cedar Rapids. Nathaniel, what does the data Mr. Brandt collected tell us about fluency instruction's effect on reading performance?
Well, Nathaniel, if you remember the 6 sub-questions from earlier, we're going to find out how fluency instruction affected each item. First was, to what extent did fluency instruction affect reading rate? The average gain of the group was around 19 words correct per minute.
T-test results suggested fluency instruction positively affected reading rate.
Second, to what extent did fluency instruction affect comprehension? Overall, the group answered about 2 more questions correctly out of 20, but according to T-test, those 2 points showed fluency instruction had little effect on comprehension. Third, to what extent did fluency instruction affect prosody? On a 16-point rubric, the average subject increased their score about 4 points, which showed fluency instruction positively affected prosody. Finally, to what extent did fluency instruction affect attitude toward reading? To what extent did fluency instruction affect motivation to read? And to what extent did fluency instruction affect students' confidence as readers? For all three of the survey questions, fluency instruction had little to no effect on the subject's attitude, motivation, or confidence. In conclusion, despite the fact the t-test didn't reject all the null hypothesis, fluency instruction has shown that it is indeed beneficial to help students become better readers.
We're now going to return to Mr. Brandt's classroom to finish up our program. Mr. Brandt, to finish up today, we'd like to know what you've learned from completing this project, as well as how it will impact your future as an educator. Hey, you're not in your classroom anymore. No, I'm not in my classroom, Nathaniel. I was afraid I was going to melt. It was so hot in there. So I went home. Here are my thoughts as the research project has been completed, though. Going into this research, I'd always been skeptical of repeated reading. I'd done it in the past, but never with much fidelity. I just couldn't understand how something seemingly so simple could be effective. After completing the research, I learned that repeated reading is an effective strategy to use to improve student reading. For my students, it was particularly effective at improving their reading rate and their prosody. Despite the fact that students didn't show a lot of improvement with their comprehension overall, I learned through my literature review that improvements in fluency can lead to significant gains in comprehension. I also learned that students find repeated readings sometimes to be a little boring. The way repeated readings are done needs to be changed so it stays engaging for the students. I found when I used books they liked or used the iPods to follow along with, I was able to keep students interested and engaged. Some of their best work was done with the iPod. Maybe it was because they were by themselves and didn't feel self-conscious about their reading ability. I also learned that I need to pick good material to use. I felt some of the comprehension pieces were too long and had too many questions. I should have spent more time looking for comprehension material that fit my needs better. Instead, I just found something that looked okay and I just went with it. Need to do a better job with that in the future. And in terms of what I've been doing in the past, it was okay, but it wasn't good enough. Repeated reading is something that every student in my class can benefit from. Some of the students that I worked with ended up being better prosodic readers than some of my better readers. So depending on their ability, they would spend a little bit of time, some more, but at least a little bit of time throughout the year practicing with repeated readings. And then another thing that I feel like I need to do better with is showing where the students are at with their data, showing the data to the kids. I haven't always done well with that. Not to discourage them, but just to show where they're at, so they can see their improvements and have more motivation to do better. And I think this would help their attitudes, not only in reading, but also in other subjects as well. And then a few students didn't show very much improvement during this process, and they were the students that really needed to make big gains. I think they were at a point where the repeated readings didn't help because they struggled so much just decoding the words. And so in the future, I need to spend time with them, maybe give them a quick phonics screen of the QPS to figure out what they really need to work on, instead of doing an activity where they're putting in a lot of effort but just kind of spinning their wheels. And finally, I found that carrying this out over a longer period of time helped. Sometimes at school we jump from thing to thing and don't put enough effort into each thing, and the students don't benefit from that. So I've learned that we need to give each task enough time so the kids can have the opportunity to make enough gains. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, Mr. Brandt has agreed to attend Proseminar at Viterbo University, where he can answer any of your questions. This is Nathaniel Brandt reporting for KVIT News.